Good morning, everybody. My name is Josh Goodman. I'm the staff historian at the State Archives of Florida here in Tallahassee, and it is a pleasure to be with you this morning talking about our top resources for researching the history of Florida counties and communities. We've got a pretty packed house today. I was glad to see we've got lots of folks from all around the state. So we've tried to use examples that will cover a little bit of everybody, but we're focusing on resources today that we have for pretty much every county in the state, and in many cases, all the counties in the state. So I hope that you guys enjoy looking at all of this. I'm going to fiddle with my screen here a little bit and get some stuff back. Okay, so let's go ahead and jump in. Getting the slides to move. Just a couple of quick things about the State Archives. I know some of you may have visited us before, and some of you are so far away that it may not be particularly easy to get over here to us, but if you do happen to come and pay us a visit, we are just like a lot of other public libraries. We do have a reference and research area where you can come in to do work here in the archives. We're located here in Tallahassee, 2 blocks behind the Capitol. We're open every weekday except for state holidays from 9 a.m. to 4:30 p.m. We also do some weekend research days. You can contact us at archivesflorida.com. We've also got the contact information for our reference desk staff on a slide at the end of the presentation. You can always get in touch with us there. We'll be glad to let you know when we're open for special events or just about our regular operating hours. You do not need an appointment, and we offer free parking. So here's a quick look at our research facility. You can see it's just like any other public library. You're just working with original historical documents instead of published books for the most part. So nice and easy to use. Well, let's go ahead and jump into our material. A common thing that we run into with folks who give us a call, sometimes in your community you've got a big anniversary coming up, or maybe you're developing a new historical exhibit. I see that we have a lot of historical societies with us. We've got a lot of libraries. Maybe you've got a big event coming up and you want to do some things to promote the local history of your county or your community. And, sometimes you've got all the resources that you need to do that locally. Sometimes you've got, a framed copy of the first community charter, the first charter for your city, or maybe you've got a copy of the act establishing your county or whatever it is that you happen to be celebrating. But sometimes you don't. Sometimes you've got the information. You may have all the dates that you need. You know exactly on what date your town was incorporated or what date your county was established, but you may not have any visuals to go with that, especially for some of you older counties where photography wasn't even really around where the county was established or when the town was first established. And sometimes maybe sometimes you've got some conflicting information and you just like to shore up your knowledge on some of these things. I happened to talk with some folks from over here in the Panhandle, I think it was Gulf County, and we did some advertising for this webinar. And I mentioned that, based on our list, one of the towns was coming up on a big anniversary, and the town clerk wrote back, and apparently they did not realize that their town was actually 25 years older than what they had thought it was. So they were getting ready to celebrate something like a 75th anniversary when they really should have been getting ready for a centennial. So there's a lot of things like that we can help you with here at the State Archives. And people tend to think of the State Archives as pertaining mainly to administrative matters at the state level, what the governor is doing, what the various executive departments are doing, the Secretary of State, the Commissioner of Education, and all of that. And it is true that the State Archives documents what those state officials are doing, but you have to remember that what they are doing is serving communities and counties all around the state. And so, even though a lot of the records we have come from those individuals, everything they're talking about is stuff that's going on in local communities. And in many cases, the record collections that we have systematically document things that are happening in the counties. The Secretary of State's records of public servants and commissions for officials. Where do those officials come from? They are sheriffs and school board members and county commissioners and justices of the peace and from counties. So think of the State Archives not just as something that documents what's going on in state government, but also what's happening in the counties and the information that's being shared from county level officials with state level officials and vice versa. So today's mission then is to look at some of the most useful resources that we have. We have 50,000 cubic feet of records here at the State Archives, so we certainly can't talk about everything today. But what I do want to do is turn you on to some of the most valuable sort of quick take resources, things that you can really use if you're getting ready for a big event. You need to put together, just the most basic information about the history of your county, the chronology of its formation, that sort of thing. And we're going to look at that in three major categories. The chronology of your county, when it's established. I noticed Amy, I think from over in St. Johns County, was asking about how you document the changes in county boundaries. We've got some information on that. Also looking at the origins of how a county gets established. We'll look at sort of the petitioning process that was very common in how counties got to be established in the 19th century. We'll also look at two kinds of famous personalities, kind of on opposite ends of the spectrum. We'll look at how to document important public officials at the county level. We'll look at how to document those. We'll also look at how to document the history of famous criminals from your county. So that's going to be interesting too. We'll also look at a couple of aspects of local history that are particularly easy to look at. And an important point I'd like to make as we go through here, while it is true that the Archives does have a lovely research facility here, and we would love to have each and every one of you come in and do days of research with us, we also understand that Tallahassee's that's a trip, that's a hike for a lot of you. And so we're going to focus on documents today that you can actually request over the phone or by email, and I'm going to show you how to make the request so specific that the research archivist here will be able to go right to exactly what you need and make the copies or the scans that you want. And you'll never have to set foot in here unless you just want to. So there's that. All right, so let's go ahead and kick off with our first category, which is chronology. How do we document the origins of counties and communities? Okay, so let's start with counties first, documenting the origins of your counties. So when Florida first started off in 1821, we just had two counties. One of which was yours, Amy. We had St. Johns County as one of those, the other being Escambia. The Suwannee River was the dividing line between those two counties. Now, the purpose of having a county is, it's really hard for one state government up here in Tallahassee to administrate everything that's going on all around the state. And so you have counties that handle those day-to-day administrative details, things like collecting taxes and issuing deeds and things like that. The county level government handles a lot of those kinds of things. And as Florida was settled, it became necessary for these two counties to divide up. The Panhandle got settled a lot quicker than the area in the peninsula, so we see a lot more of the counties dividing up in the Panhandle and the northern part of St. Johns County first. But as we move through the 19th century, particularly in the post-Civil War era, those counties start popping up pretty quickly. So how does that happen? Ever since Florida was still a territory, from a constitutional perspective, to create a new county, you've got to get a legislative act establishing that county. And this is kind of what those legislative acts look like. All the way back to the act, as a matter of fact, it is the first act that was passed by the legislature in their first meeting in 1822. That's when they created those two counties. But actually, no, that actually happened during Jackson's administration before the legislature had even met. But the legislature, when they meet each year, they would, in the 19th century, look at any request to create new counties and divide up existing counties. And this is essentially the documents that they would create. You just have an act that would be titled something like an act to organize a county or establish a county called Marion County. Or whatever county it happens to be. Sometimes it would be phrased as an act to divide one county into some other counties, and it would have the names in there. But essentially, what those acts consist of is a name for the county, the exact boundaries of the county at that time, and then some provisions for how the county's leadership would be established, who would be sort of the individuals who would be in charge of the county, where the county officials would meet until a county seat was selected, and that sort of thing. Now, there's two ways essentially that you can get your hands on these documents. If you know what year your county was established, you can look at the printed version, the published version of these acts and resolutions. You can find it there. But I wanted to make sure and include these handwritten versions because for each of the printed statutes and the printed acts and resolutions of the legislature that you can get online in the book form, we actually have the originals to those here at the archives. And wouldn't that make a great visual if you're doing a historical display or a timeline, or maybe you're putting together an online exhibit on the history of your county? Getting your hands on these would be really cool. So I'm going to show you how to get your hands on both versions, the printed versions of the acts and resolutions of the legislature as well as the handwritten versions. Okay, so let me jump over into Google Chrome. If you're wanting to get the print versions, and that's great if you just need the text and the dates and the names of people and that sort of thing, jump over to the State Library's online catalog, which you can get that at we actually have a little redirect that's a little easier to remember, and that's library.florida.gov. If we go to that, it's going to take you right to this page, and just type in acts resolutions. Okay, and what that's going to do is that's going to give you, first of all, this is what you would get if your county was established from 1845 and onward. You're going to want to look in the acts and resolutions for the General Assembly of the state of Florida. And you'll notice right here it's got electronic access. If I right-click on that, make myself a new tab here, then you'll see that they've got the acts and resolutions for each year. There's a little bit of a gap right here. You can find a lot of these that are in the gap. They're continuing to digitize those, and you'll see more of those pop up as we go. But you can also get those through Hathitrust or through Google Books. But for many of the years, you can get them right here on this website. And these, not only are these going to give you the acts and resolutions where a county is originally established, but also if the boundaries have changed, or if your county, once it was established, if it was divided into more counties, those acts will also be in here. So when you click on any one of these, it'll just take you to a nice PDF, and you'll get the acts and resolutions. There they are. Usually there's going to be a table of contents at the beginning, and then you get right into the acts that were passed by the legislature. And this is all the acts. So, for example, we've got one here that's talking about how juries are selected and that sort of thing. All right. So, but how do you get to the handwritten originals, those really cool-looking handwritten originals? Those we do not have digitized and available online, with the exception of this one from Marion County I do happen to have online. I think they're celebrating a big anniversary this year, and so we decided to put one up onto floridamemory.com for that. But you can request a copy of this anytime, because all of the handwritten copies of laws that have been passed ever since the first meeting of the legislature in 1822, those are all in one collection here at the archives. We call it Series S222 here at the State Archives of Florida. And if you call the reference desk, if you contact the reference desk and say, I would like to get a copy of the original act establishing Gilchrist County or Taylor County or whatever county you happen to be interested in, and say, I would like an original, nice color scan. Let them know what resolution you need. They may send you to the photo lab if you're needing a print. We can do prints of these, but we can also just do a nice high resolution scan for you, whatever that is that you need. And reproduction fees do apply for that, but it's not that much. It's certainly cheaper than if you were trying to get like photos from Getty or one of these big photo providers. We don't charge licensing fees for this stuff. Just the costs of reproduction is all that we charge there. And so just say, yeah, I need a copy of the act establishing such and such a county. And that's really all they need, because they can look that up. If you know the year, that's going to help them even more. It's going to help them find that faster. They can usually get that copy job done in just a day or two. And they'll let you know if it's going to be any longer than that. But it's usually just going to be a day or two to get a copy of the act establishing your county or any other act that you want. If in the early days, there's acts establishing ferries crossing rivers and acts establishing roads, acts incorporating towns. We're going to talk about that a little later, and they can help you get your hands on all of those. But there's actually a whole process, and that's kind of the culmination. The act or resolution establishing your county is kind of the culmination of a whole process. Usually, before that happens, people have to actually want the counties to get divided or want the counties to get established. So how do you document that process? Well, usually, in the old days at least, the way that that worked is people would actually petition the legislature to get the county divided or to get a county established or renamed. So what we're looking at right here is an example of that. We're looking at a petition that came from a number of citizens in Alachua County, a number of them being from the southern end of Alachua County, back when it used to stretch all the way down to Tampa. And they're saying, look, you know, Alachua County embraces the settlements of, look, it's got Palatka in here. I think they're talking about a different settlement, even though it looks a little bit like Palatka. I think it's something different. They're saying we've got 9 Mile Pond, Fort King, that's around Ocala. You know, we've got Ratcliffe Springs, Micanopy, Fort Crane. We've got all these places in here. Cedar Key, which is now part of Levy County. You know, they're saying Alachua County is gigantic. We've got to get this thing divided. Oh, and by the way, we even have a suggestion for what we'd like to call it. Now, I'll go ahead and give you a little bit of a spoiler alert. This is the petition that kind of got the conversation started for Marion County to be established in what had been the southern part of Alachua County. But look what they wanted to call it originally. If you look at the petition here, they actually wanted to call Marion County Seminole County originally. So, yeah, Seminole County could have been somewhere completely different. And then you look, somebody has actually crossed out Seminole and they put Amathla, which is a Native American word. So what your county is called now, oftentimes that was a whole process. Several different names may have been kicked around in different petitions to establish your county. So where do you find these records? Okay. The State Archives has a number of records from the legislature, not just the acts that they pass, but also what we call their session papers or their session records, drafts of bills, petitions, letters received from constituents, things like that. And we have those records for the territorial era, and then we have them for certain parts of the late 19th century and the statehood era. And then we've really got very thick documentation of what the different committees of the legislature are doing once you get to the date of the State Archives establishment in the late 1960s. But for determining county origins, these petitions are really great, and we have them for the territorial era and the early statehood era pretty well. They're in several different series. So the way that you would request this, if you want to know if there are any petitions that relate to the founding of your county or the division of your county, what you would want to do is you'd want to call into the State Archives reference desk and say, I'm interested to know, you know, my county's founded in 1845, but I'm interested to know if there were any petitions sent into the legislature asking for that particular county to be established. And the reference desk, they can actually do, I think it's either 15 or 30 minutes of research that they can do to support your request. And what they can do is sort of go directly to one of these series here, 876, 77, or 87, and they can actually go in and look to see if anything pops out at them. They may bring me in on that inquiry, or you know, they'll see if they can find anything on that. And oftentimes, because these records are organized chronologically, if you give them a date range, they'll be able to look in that date range and determine pretty quickly whether there's anything that we have that's responsive to that request. Now, there's another kind of petition, renaming. We've had a number of counties over the years that have either disappeared, like Fayette County, which was part of Jackson County. It lasted for about 2 years, and then it went back to just being Jackson County. We've had a couple of, like Bradford County started out as New River County. St. Lucie has been attached to 2 different counties, so there's that. But yeah, funny story. You know, one of the most Chamber of Commerce friendly counties in the state, one of our shining gems of tourism, Orange County, actually started out with some of the, I would argue, some of the worst marketing in the world, because the original name for Orange County was Mosquito County. I don't know where the Chamber of Commerce was when they were trying to come up with that name. But anyway, so how does a county get renamed? Again, people will petition the legislature. So, for example, we have here a petition that comes from folks in what's now Orange County, but at that time it was called Mosquito County. And they said, let's see, we come to you with feelings of respect and humbly pray that the name of Mosquito be altered and changed to that of Harrison County. William Henry Harrison, who'd been President of the United States, had just recently died. And so I think these folks thought that they would honor his memory by naming the county after them. But it sounds like they were a little desperate, because look here at the next sentence. The name of Mosquito is very unpleasant to many of the citizens of said county. And so they were asking for the name to be changed. And actually, this petition was not successful because, as you might imagine, we don't have a Harrison County. Mississippi has one, but we don't. But they actually tried to change the name of Mosquito County 3 different times before it finally took. Harrison County was one attempt, and then they tried to change it to Lee Reed County. There's a whole story behind that, how that one didn't work. There was some intrigue there. But then finally, around the 1840s, they changed it over to being Orange County. But that brings up an important point that I should mention. Not every petition is successful, and not everything in the petition is successful. So, for example, that thing that we were looking at earlier, trying to get Marion County established, the county was established essentially along the lines of the boundaries that these petitioners were asking for, but they did not name the place Seminole County or Amafla County, mainly because feelings were still a little bit raw after the Second Seminole War, and so they ended up choosing something. They ended up naming it after Francis Marion instead. So a lot of these petitions get kind of half granted. So you want to think about that if you're trying to sort of reconstruct the origin story for your county. You may want to keep in mind that some of these petitions may actually go farther back than the one that actually resulted in your county being created. Also, maps. Amy from St. Johns County was asking about ways of sort of documenting the changes in county boundaries. Maps are a great way to do that. For example, we see here St. Johns County changing from being this yellow thing that's essentially the entire Florida Peninsula in 1822. But we can see that pretty quickly after that, Mosquito sort of became the one that was taking up most of the peninsula, and St. John's had been relegated to this area up here. But you'll see, if you're from St. Johns County, you know that you guys don't have any territory on the west side of the St. Johns River anymore, but you did as of 1827. But if we fast forward to 1875, we can see that that territory had contracted even more, and that you're completely on the eastern side. I saw a question pop up from Kate Holmes asking who has the final say on the naming. The final say is the legislature. You can ask and ask all you want, but if the legislature does not vote for that name change, if they don't vote for it, then it doesn't happen. It has to be done. The naming has to be done by legislative act. Okay, so where do you find these maps? Well, the State Library of Florida has, I don't know what the total number is, but it's got to be in the thousands of maps that they have there. And we have digitized as many as we have that are original and where we could feel pretty certain that we didn't have a copyright violation of any sort. So we've got most of the State Library's Florida map collection online now on floridamemory.com. I hope you guys are taking full advantage of Florida Memory. You do not have to have a password or a login. This is a state-funded service, so it's good. You can just go in and use the record collections that we have here. If you go to floridamemory.com and click on Collections, we've got a whole bunch of things here that are helpful for tracing the history of your county, but the maps are perhaps one of our favorites. And you can actually go by time period, so you can sort of trace your county through a period of time. There you can get all sorts of different ones. Like if I type in, let's say Highlands County, that's going to bring back every map I've got that includes Highlands County, including the territory that covers Highlands County. So there may be some others that don't have the county created just yet. Okay. So let's jump back into our PowerPoint. I saw we had a couple other questions pop up. I'm going to hit those at the end just to keep us moving. Now, here's one other map. This is a particular map that is really useful. Some of you have been asking about, county boundaries and how do you trace when they change. This map was actually created to answer that exact question. And what this is somebody actually traced all the different times that new counties were created or major county boundary changes were done. And so let's actually show you how to get to that one. Best thing to do is to actually put in the title of this map into Florida Memory, and that's going to get you Creation of Florida Counties. So if we go back over to Florida Memory, and just from a top-level search, if we do Creation Florida Counties, okay, you'll see there's two different versions. It looks like back in the early days of the Florida Photographic Collection, somebody actually just took a picture of this so that folks would know that we had it. But if you do this nice color one that's in the Florida Maps collection, that's good because it's going to be zoomable. Yes. And so you can look at each sort of moment in time and see what the changes were, the counties that were added, major boundary changes, and it'll actually show you the acts, the numbers of the acts, and the dates of those acts when those counties were created. And I think they've got major changes. Okay, it looks like they've got the changes like names, name changes, and things like that in here as well. And then even if they don't have the boundary change you're looking for, you can still look through the acts and resolutions that we looked at earlier from the State Library, and that'll get you that. By the way, all of these maps that we have online, again, we're not like Getty Images. We're not here to make money off of these. We only recoup staff costs. So most of the time, we have really good high-resolution copies of these documents already online. If you click on Download Image right here, this is going to give you a pretty awesome, I mean, that's a 15-megabyte file of this map. That's pretty big. You're going to be able to put that on an exhibit panel or in your publication, and you're not going to have to order anything for these maps. So that's something pretty cool. All right, documenting the origins of your community. Now, many communities start out, some of you might be, when you calculate the anniversary of your town or city, you might be thinking about the incorporation date as the date that you celebrate when you're thinking about your anniversary. And that's great. But keep in mind that some communities are never incorporated, and some communities, don't just start out as an incorporated town. People tend to be settled in places that get incorporated for years, decades, before the town is actually incorporated. So how do you trace that history? And the best data point that I can offer you is post offices, because that's kind of like the mark of a settlement becoming a real bona fide settlement, is when they're important enough that they want to get their own post office. So how do you determine when a place gets a post office? The good news is that our buddy John S. Gallagher has already done us all a solid, and they have gotten us this, he's made this book here, Florida Post Offices, that literally has the establishment and disestablishment date of every single post office that there has ever been in the state of Florida up through the 1970s. Okay, and this is essentially what that book looks like. We have it here at the State Library, and it's available in many other libraries around the state. And if you call us up and say, hey, I need to know, when the post office at so-and-so was established, we can look that up for you, and we'd be glad to get a copy of that page and send that over to you so you'll have the information. So, for example, I've pulled some stuff here from Clay County. If somebody from Clay County were to call up and say, hey, we've got this little community called Brixton, and it was never incorporated, so we can't find any incorporation dates in the acts and resolutions of the state legislature, but do you guys have a sense of when the post office was established? We would go to this book, and we can look up exactly when Brixton was established. Looks like it was very short-lived when it was disestablished. We can also determine where the mail was sent after it closed. We can also determine who the first postmaster was. All of this, as you can imagine, is really great information, especially if you've got kind of a ghost town and you're trying to do the history of a ghost town. By the way, we have a whole webinar just on tracing the history of ghost towns. It's on our YouTube channel for the Bureau of Library Development here at the Florida Department of State. But I don't happen to have anything in here in this particular example that is, well, okay, if you look down here in the small one, Keystone Heights, I know that that's an incorporated community. Now, I'm not sure when Keystone Heights was incorporated, But if, say, you were planning a big anniversary celebration for Keystone Heights and you'd like to know something about when a post office was first there, you can get that date here. And look, you can even see that the place used to have a completely different name, formerly Brooklyn. So we could go back up here and see when Brooklyn had its post office established. So it's a little bit of a rabbit hole, but lots of good information. But we can do you even better than this. This is particularly good when you're dealing with communities and you're not exactly sure, they're ghost towns or you're not actually sure where they were located. Okay, let's say we can actually get you onto the records that show where communities were originally established and where their post office was located. So let's say, for example, that I wanted to do the history of Franklin, which is a little community. It was never incorporated. It's in Alachua County. And let's say that I wanted to do the history of Franklin. Okay, and I don't know exactly where Franklin was established. It's kind of a ghost town now. All right, I can actually use Postal Service records to figure out where Franklin was located and when it was established. The National Archives has those records. Anytime that you're getting a post office, you actually have to apply for that post office. And you've got to demonstrate to the Postal Service why you actually need a post office in that neighborhood. You've got to demonstrate that you're far enough away from an established postal route and other established post offices. You also have to show that that it's difficult for people to get to those other post offices. They want to know about where the nearest bodies of water are. They want to know where the nearest postal route is, how long it's going to be for a postal carrier to get mail down to that area. And so they made you fill out a pretty detailed application for that. The National Archives has all of that material, but they have it on microfilm, and we have copies of all of that microfilm for the state of Florida right here at the State Library and State Archives. And so if you call us up and you want to get one of these post office applications, we can get that for you. Reproduction fees may apply. They'll let you know when they do the scans and things. They'll do you a quote on how much that's going to be. I think it's like 25 cents a page, though, so not a big lift on that, and certainly worth it if you're planning one of these county origin or community origin historical displays or something. Okay, so I've given you the information here, the microfilm number from NARA. If you want to get your own copy, you want to get your own microfilm, or if you want to call up there and see if you can get like a nice color scan of one of these things. I'm not sure if the National Archives can do that. They may point you to the microfilm. But anyway, one way or another, we can at least get you this much. And you can see here all the information that they've got about Franklin. What's great is this line right here. Notice that the person who's applying for the post office is telling the Postal Service exactly where it's located in the Public Land Survey System. This one's located in the southeastern quarter of Section 36 of Township 8 South, Range 16 East. Now, those coordinates are referring to the Public Land Survey System, which we still use to measure the location of land and real space today. We do have a couple of webinars on how to work that system. Again, they're in the Bureau of Library Development's YouTube channel, and we're certainly glad for you to get a look at those. Let's see. So, last but not least, so we've covered how to get into the history of when a post office is established. But towns, like counties, in order to be established as a municipality that can do business as a corporation, essentially, they also must be established by the legislature. Now, a little caveat to that. Many counties, you will find, if you go to the clerk of courts in your county courthouse, you will find that many clerks of courts actually have books of incorporations that are established locally. And you can incorporate yourself. It was possible for a number of years in Florida to incorporate a business or a town locally at the county level. I don't know whether that was because maybe if you were just going to be doing business at the county level and you weren't going to be doing business anywhere else in the state, and so you would only ever need to do anything in the courts of that county. I'm not sure if that's the reason for that. But to make a long story short, you oftentimes can find the original incorporating documents for a town in the Book of Incorporations at the county level. But in order to do business at the state level, a municipality did have to be incorporated by the state legislature. And you'll oftentimes find that a town is incorporated several different times. if a county completely overhauls its form of government, maybe they go from the strong mayor to, weak mayor, strong council. There's several different ways of setting up a municipality. And sometimes instead of amending the existing town charter, oftentimes they'll scrap the existing town charter. They will actually unincorporate a town and then reincorporate it in a different act. So that's how our friends over in Gulf County, I think that's how they ended up thinking that their town was established in 1959 when it was actually established in the 20s, was because towns can be incorporated several different times. Just like the case with the acts establishing counties, you can use the state library's digitized editions of the acts and resolutions online. You can get that the ones for towns the same way that you get the ones for counties. By the way, I did not show you, we do have the ones for prior to 1845. You'll notice that these only go from 1845 forward, and the reason for that is that prior to 1845, Florida is a territory, not a state. If you scroll down a little bit, let's see. If you scroll down a little bit, you'll get to acts and resolutions of the Legislative Council of the Territory of Florida. And then just like we had for the state library has gone through and digitized the acts and resolutions for every single year of Florida's territorial existence. Now remember that these are the printed, published versions of those acts and resolutions. If you want the handwritten ones, you're going to go to the state archives, not the state library. So these are those printed, published versions. Okay? Let's jump back into the PowerPoint. But just like with the counties, if you want a nice color scan of the act establishing your town, we can get that for you. Okay, for example, here's an act incorporating the town of Palatka. And what's great about this is it's got those signatures, from the governor. It has to get signed off. It does not have to get signed off by the governor. If there's a couple of different ways that, if the governor vetoes an act establishing a town, the legislature can override that. They can also do a pocket veto where they do it right there at the end of the legislative session, and it goes into session without the governor's signature. But in many cases, the governor does sign off on these. And you've got the nice signatures of the president of the Senate and the secretary of the House. Great stuff. Beautiful visual. And again, you would just contact the state archives reference desk and say, hey, my town was established in such and such a year. Could I get a nice copy of the act establishing my town? Okay, so let's look at ways of documenting personalities. We're going to look at two main kinds of famous personalities from your county. We're going to look at public officials first. The state archives, as the official repository for Florida state government records, anytime somebody occupies a position at the state or county level, be it a county commissioner or a member of the school board or a member of the local hospital board, if that is a legislatively mandated board, and a lot of counties had those: hospital board, welfare board, library board, that sort of thing, soil and water conservation board, that sort of thing. When somebody occupies one of those jobs, they must be commissioned. They have to receive a commission from the governor. And as the secretary of the governor, in a sense, the Secretary of State keeps up with all of those commissions that have been handed out to public officials at the state or county level. And we actually keep file copies of those commissions dating all the way back to the 1870s, and in some cases even back into the territorial era, at least the information relating to the granting of those commissions back into the territorial era. And there's some other paperwork associated with those commissions that we have as well. So I want to take a look at an example. This is my buddy Bob Hosford over in Liberty County. He was a county judge, he was a sheriff, he was a tax assessor. He did a lot of stuff over the course of his life. And I know that there are a lot of sort of founding fathers in your counties and communities who are very important and special to you. And wouldn't it be great if you were putting together a display on these guys? Wouldn't it be great if you could have a copy of his commission or his oath of office or his bond that he had to sign to get into office? So I'm going to show you how to get that information. First off, the Secretary of State's office has been keeping a list of all the commissions that have been given out to all county level officials that are commissioned ever since the 1820s. And we have those lists here at the State Archives. I'm looking here, for example, at an excerpt from a page in those records showing me all of the county officials that were commissioned for Liberty County in the late 1870s. And you can see that my buddy Bob Hosford is right here. He was commissioned as sheriff. I can get the date that he was confirmed. Looks like they did a little oops here with the stuff. So they're letting us know that he was actually confirmed on February 11th of 79. His bond was filed on March 1st because sheriff was a bonded position at that time. And my guess is that the March 1st date here is probably the date of his actual commission. And you can see over here, and we have this for every public official who was ever commissioned. So if you're trying to get a list of all your sheriffs, or trying to get a list of all your county commissioners, or a list of all your county judges or school board members or whatever, we've got the data to get that list. We get calls all the time from folks who are trying to get that information. We do have that, and we love providing that to you. So definitely ask about these records. These lists of county officials, of commissioned officials, they are all contained in Series S1284. If you contact the State Archives Reference Desk and say, hey, I need to get a list together of all of our sheriffs, or I need to know who was sheriff of Marion County in 1875, we can go to Series S1284 and we can get that information for you. We also have a project going right now where we're digitizing this and we're crowdsourcing the transcription out to the county. So it's kind of a mutual benefit thing. We're going to get a nice collection to put on floridamemory.com where everybody can get to the data, and our digital volunteers get to keep the data that they create from doing the transcription. So if you're interested in volunteering with that, I've got a slide at the end showing how we do that. So we've got this information, but we can do even better. Okay, this is a copy of the actual oath of office that our buddy Bob Hosford signed. Unlike the governor and the cabinet, all of these county level officials, all these sheriffs and county commissioners and stuff, they can't all come to Tallahassee to take their oath of office. So they actually write their oath of office and sign their oath of office and send it back into the Secretary of State to be filed. What's so wonderful about these is it's actually got their signatures. Imagine how cool it would be if you were in Liberty County doing a historical display on kind of the founding fathers or really big important guys from the history, and you can actually get their signatures on these documents to use in your historical displays. This document will help give you that. So these are contained in Series S622. So if you were interested in getting the oath of office for a particular guy, maybe you want to do one of your really important sheriffs or something, you would just call into the State Archives Reference Desk and say, hey, we've got this guy who was sheriff in the 1870s. His name is John Smith. We're interested to know if his oath of office is contained. And you can even say, look in Series S622. The Archives Reference Desk people will generally know that. But if you mention this, this may speed up the process of looking at that. It'll save them having to look the number up. So we've got that, but we can do you one even better. We also have, if a position was bonded and they had to turn in a bond, we oftentimes will actually have copies of the bond that they had to file. What this is if you're in a position like tax assessor, tax collector, sheriff, or something like that, where if you have an oopsie and you do your job incorrectly, or you have malfeasance or something, it may cost money to put right what you have wronged. And so in a lot of cases, one of the prerequisites of office is you had to be ready to put up a certain amount of money that you were on the hook for if something goes wrong with the job that you do. And usually people are not able to put that bond up by themselves. Oftentimes they have to have a few of their buddies put in some money as well. So what we're getting here is Bob Hosford's bond for where he was serving. I believe it's when he was serving as sheriff. It may have been something different, because he did a bunch of stuff. Anyway, but you can see here all of the different people who put money up to support him in the event that he had something go wrong with his job. This is great if you're trying to build trying to understand kind of the power structure of a county at a given time, because it gives you not only information about the public official himself, but also the people who sort of worked with him. A lot of times these guys would help bond each other. but sometimes you get a sense of what families are kind of have the money at a particular time and their alliances. So pretty cool stuff. All right. Famous criminals, the other end of the social spectrum, so to speak. We do have records here that document certain famous criminals. Now, they have to have been big enough of a criminal that they made it to the state prison or that they were executed. One of those two things. We've got ways to document those two kinds of things. So let's look at those. Two kinds of documents. First of all, state prison registers. Funny little thing about records, there's actually some restrictions on getting your hands on the documents associated with clemency. But if you're just getting arrested and thrown into the state prison at Rayford, those are public record. Don't ask me how those rules got made. But anyway, if you're interested, if you know that you've got somebody who did something really bad in your county and they were sent to the state prison, we do have those records. We can't serve those to you if they're more recent than 50 years, but once they get to the 50-year moving wall and backwards, we can serve those records to you. So it's as easy as calling the State Archives reference desk and saying, hey, we've got this guy who was a big bank robber back in the 1920s. His name was so-and-so. We would like to see the page from the prison register that shows his information on there. And we've got it as this nice typed alphabetical listing, and then there's also a handwritten register as well. You can request copies of one or both, whichever you like. Reproduction fees apply, of course, but it's not that much. We're also, by the way, we've digitized these, and these will be going up on Florida Memories sometime this fiscal year, we hope. It's a really big collection. It's taking a lot of time to transcribe. By the way, if you're interested in transcribing some of that with us as well, we have a way to do that remotely so that you can do the work from the comfort of your own home. So lots of good information on these prison registers. If you're doing a documentary of some sort on crime, you know, true crime and law enforcement in your community, this is a great kind of record to look at for that. If you've got somebody who a death warrant was signed for by the governor, it has to the death warrant has to have been signed by the governor. So you can't go back into the time period when when the governor didn't have to actually sign off on a death warrant. Nowadays, the governor signs off on all death warrants, and it's been that way since I believe the 1890s. Don't quote me on that, but I know that we have them going back at least that far. If the governor signed a death warrant for somebody from your county, we will have it. This is what those look like. Oftentimes it's on paper that's edged in black, and it'll have black ribbon because they figure it's a pretty serious thing, so they put black ribbon on it. But this is the kind of information that's in there, yeah, you can get death warrants for folks. So there's that. Now, two kinds of local history. Again, 50,000 cubic feet of records. Obviously, there's way more stuff that we have here available for you at the State Archives than we can give you in this one PowerPoint. I hope that you'll look at some of the other webinars that we've done on the Bureau of Library Development's YouTube channel, because we've got a lot of stuff in there about researching historic businesses, researching, land belonging to ancestors and big families and stuff. But there's two things I wanted to harp on because we're coming up on some big anniversaries. We're coming up on the 75th anniversary of victory in World War II, a great excuse for you to do a historical display about World War II in your county or your community. We're also coming up on the centennial of the 19th Amendment, women getting the right to vote in state and national elections. And so for those reasons, I want to focus on great documents that we have for your county in World War II, pertaining to World War II, and pertaining to women getting the right to vote and serving in public office. So let's go through that pretty quickly here. All right, so for World War II, there is an entity that existed during the course of World War II called the State Defense Council. Now, the military aspect of World War II is, of course, very popular, very important, but there's also a lot going on right here on the home front. At the federal level, there was an agency called the Office of Civilian Defense, the OCD. You might have seen those CD logos where it's the triangle, the blue triangle with the red CD letters in there. You might have seen that on documents from the World War II era, things that are going on the home front. But that's where that comes from, is that Office of Civilian Defense or Civil Defense. And that office coordinated all of those famous home front efforts that you've read so much about. Things like the Ground Observation Corps, where people are volunteering to stand in church steeples and on observation towers and look for enemy aircraft, and scrap collection drives and bond drives and and organizing child care for women who are working in the shipbuilding factories and things like that. A lot of that stuff gets organized at the federal level through the Office of Civilian Defense. But each state also had a defense council that kind of took its marching orders from the Office of Civilian Defense in Washington, as well as other agencies in the area. And within the State Defense Council here in in Florida, sorry, I'm from Perry, so I've got Perry on the brain at the moment. Within each county and each major community, you also had local defense councils that took their marching orders from the State Defense Council. So we have the records of the State Defense Council here at the State Archives of Florida. We have their minutes. We have the posters that they created, and many of the big posters, the big federally distributed posters that they used as well and distributed to the counties. We also have all of the correspondence that they had with the different counties. Why that's important for you. The county defense councils and the defense councils for the big cities like Jacksonville and Tampa and Miami, they were constantly, every day, communicating with the State Defense Council about all the stuff they were doing, all the films that they were showing about how to respond for a gas attack, all the training that they were doing for block leaders who were walking around to all their neighbors' houses and saying, hey, have you seen this latest bulletin about Victory Gardens? Here's the information. Here's where you can get free garden seed. Here's where you can go if you need child care because you're working, part-time at a shipbuilding factory, all this stuff. And so you can use these state-level records to get a sense of what's going on in your county. And what I've got here is a few examples of the kinds of records that those county and city defense councils were sending in. This here, for example, this letter is not particularly detailed. It's just saying, hey, I received this stuff from you, and here's the name of the folks who are going to be in charge of recreation for Manatee County. Putting on shows for any soldiers who happen to be in the area, making sure that people have something to do so they're staying out of trouble. But look at all the stuff you get on the letterhead. A lot of these defense councils developed letterhead, and they would put in the names of all of these people who were doing jobs for the Defense Council. If you're putting together a display on World War II in your community and you're trying to figure out how do I even know who was involved in these home front efforts, these records are a great way to get at that, because they'll oftentimes have the really good letterhead. Sometimes they'll discuss the names of people who were doing different things. Imagine being able to go to those families and ask them if they have any records or photographs from that. By the way, keep us in mind. We'd love to have some of those for Florida Memory. If you have those great historical photographs, we'd love to put them online. Everybody had to take an oath. If you were going to be a home front worker for the Defense Council, you had to take an oath. So that's another great way to get your hands on the names of people who were doing things. Also, these are great visuals for a historical display. Look, telegram. This is a cute one. Look at this telegram that they were sending in to the State Defense Council talking about rubber collecting rubber. And look at this. And the stretchy stuff is still rolling in by wholesale, retail, and shirt tail. Yeah. So you find a lot of cute stuff like that. So the way that this works, this is an example of a piece of ephemera, a little leaflet that they were handing out to people in Leon County, trying to get them to grow victory gardens and that sort of thing. So it's a little bit of a grab bag. Every county's records are different. But the way that this is organized is Series S419, you see there at the bottom of the screen, the State Defense Council subject files. Those subject files are arranged alphabetically, and every county and major community pretty much has at least one folder in that thing. So what you can do if you want to use this data and get your hands on this is I would recommend you contact the State Archives reference desk and say, hey, would you look in Series S419 for me and find the records for Charlotte County, and I would just like to know how much would it cost for me to get everything in that county folder photocopied and sent over to me, or scanned and sent over to me, and they'll get you a quote. Most of the, for some of the smaller counties, it's only going to be maybe 50 copies. For some of you, it might be 400 copies. Just get them to do a quote, and if you have something specific that you're looking for, ask for that. Maybe they can help with a specific request. I will show you real quick how to get to a list of everything in Series S419. If any of you have ever used the State Archives, let's see, I don't have it up here yet, archivescatalog.info.florida.gov. This is a little different than Florida Memory. Florida Memory is everything that we have digitized. The Archives Online Catalog, this is everything, whether we've digitized it or not. I'm going to show you a little trick when you want to look up the contents of a specific series. All right, if I want to look at the contents of Series S419, this is how I would do it. I would put in S space 419 with quotes around it. Make sure you're searching at the series collection level and click search. And that's going to take me directly to Series S419 so that I can look at an inventory of it. Okay, this is going to give me a little bit of information about the series itself, but if I click on the folder icon, it's going to show me all the folders that are in that collection so that I can see exactly what folders that we have on my county. I'm going to show you a little trick. If you go up here into the address where it says record max equals 30, that's telling the server how many results to show you. Change that to just 930. Okay, it'll take a second to reload the page, or it might even take a lot of seconds. And we're reloading. And what it's going to do is it's going to make it to where you can look at that entire collection all at one time. Okay, it looks like I've made it mad. So let me try this another way, one time. We'll try it one more time, just in the interest of time. But suffice it to say, you could see from that previous screen that we were looking at that it just gives you the list of folders there. You just look up your folder for your county, and it works. Now, this is not wanting to go, and in the interest of time, I'm going to jump back into the PowerPoint, but this is the site where you would do that. Fiddle with it, and it should work just fine for you. Okay, women in public office in our last couple of minutes here. We are looking at the centennial of women getting the right to vote. Now, you do know there were women voting in Florida prior to the passage of the 19th Amendment. It's just that they were mainly voting just in city elections. Fellsmere, for example, which is now, I think that's in Indian River County. Don't quote me on that. But Fellsmere is actually the first town to grant women the right to vote in municipal elections in 1915. We also had women serving in public office in their own right prior to women voting. There's no law that said a woman could not serve in public office. It's just that she couldn't vote. So a lot of people sort of took that to mean that a woman could not serve in a lot of commissioned public offices, but that does happen. For example, in Alachua County, there's a woman in the 19-teens who actually serves as an inspector of marks and brands as early as 1912 or 13. But anyway, so here's what we have on documenting this. So in 1920, once women start getting the vote, that's the first year that women are actually voting in state and national elections. Women start running for public office in large numbers here in Florida. So how do you document who was the first woman to run for public office or to get the party's nomination, the Democratic nomination or any party's nomination for public office, or the first person to serve in a public office? The records that we have that are going to help you with that the best are canvassing reports. This is what the county turns in to the Secretary of State once they count up all the votes in their county and their canvassing board certifies the results from that county. They turn in these canvassing reports. Nowadays it happens electronically, but well into the 20th century it happened on paper. Okay? And we have these records going all the way back to 1865. So I'm looking here, for example, I think this is from Osceola County. It may be Okeechobee. It's one of the O's. Anyway, this is an excerpt from a canvassing report. This is showing us the results of the election for County Superintendent of Public Instruction and for Justice of the Peace in District Number 1 in, again, I think this is Osceola County. But look here, it's showing you the total number of votes cast. It's showing you all the different candidates who were on the ballot. And we can see that Laura Lee, and yes, this is Osceola County, I remember now. Okay, she received 721 votes. So while she did not win the election, she was the first person to run for that position. And I think we found that she was the first person to run for that position in Osceola County. So if you're doing a display on sort of the first women to serve in public office or run for public office, this is really valuable information. Also down here we've got an example, Jessie Kleinman. She actually got the office. She ran unopposed to become the Justice of the Peace for District Number 1. And again, we have these records going all the way back to 1865. The way you request these is you just contact the State Archives reference desk and say, I would like to get my hands on the canvassing reports from series S1258. They're all in one series, and tell them the year that you want. And tell them, hey, I'm trying to figure out who the first woman was to serve in such and such of an office, or any office at all. And I would recommend that you start with the 1920 canvassing reports, but you may also want to go a couple of years before that, because as the women's suffrage movement was really getting hot, sometimes women would run for public office even if there was some question about whether they actually could run for office, whether it was legal, that sort of thing. It's possible that women may have even tried to get on the ballot before they could vote. So I would certainly recommend looking at those as well. But definitely 1920 and forward, that's going to give you a lot of your firsts. Okay, we've got a couple other things in here. Just because of the time, we won't be able to share a whole lot of it. Governor's correspondence, we have the governor's correspondence going all the way back into the territorial era. If you're interested in what's going on in your county at a particular time, looking at the governor's correspondence is a great way to kind of put your thumb on the heartbeat of what's going on in the individual counties. The way you do that is you just, whichever time period it is, figure out who's the governor for that time period, and those are the ones you want to look at. We also have a pretty extensive collection of ephemera from the various counties and communities here at the State Library. A lot of that is digitized and available in the selected documents collections on floridamemory.com. But we also have a lot that has not yet been digitized. By the way, we also accept donations of this kind of stuff. So if you've got some laying around, maybe somebody donated a box of it and you've already got a lot of it and you're wondering what to do with those duplicates, we do accept donations of ephemera. We would love to have those. Last but not least, if you're interested in doing some of that digital volunteering that we're talking about, getting that data about all the different public officers, everything can be done from the comfort of your own home. We'll send you the scans, you do the transcripts. It'll all end up on a database that everyone can use on floridamemory.com. So you'll be doing not only us a service, but a great big public service for all the researchers in the state. Whew! That was a lot of material. Do we have any questions?
And of course we do. Amy says, when a new county is formed, do they obtain possession of records pertaining to their geographic boundaries from the previous larger county, or do they start fresh?
That is an excellent question. A lot of times they would get copies. So like, yes, for example, I'm going to use my home county as an example because I've run into this quite a bit. So in 1856, for example, Lafayette, and never say Lafayette down there, they'll correct you, it's Lafayette County. Lafayette County and Taylor County were created from Madison County in 1856, December of 1856. So the question is, what happens to the deeds that pertain to land in those counties that were, when those deeds were filed, they were filed with the clerk of court in Madison County? And you can imagine deeds is the first kind of record that comes to mind, but there are lots of records that would pertain to that, court cases that involved people from those areas. Any records that would be relevant to those counties that were split off from the parent county, what generally happens is the clerk of courts for the new county, they will do copies of those deeds. They will file copies in their deed books down there. Different counties don't always do it exactly the same. Sometimes they'll say it's a copy. Sometimes they act as though the transaction actually took place in their county. And then there are some deeds for which there may not be copies. And then you would have to go back to the parent county to get those based on the date is how you would know whether you needed to go back to the old courthouse, to the parent county's courthouse. But generally that's the way it works, is they'll copy those records.
Does anybody else have any other questions? Josh, you've covered a lot of territory here. Thank you for all of your expertise. If you guys have any questions for Josh, now is the time to ask them.
And I should also mention, in addition to the archives bit, if you'd like to request copies of something, archives@dos.myflorida.com. That's the address to use. If you've got a historical question and you'd like to just a project that you're kicking around and just have sort of a historical question you'd like to ask, you're also welcome to email me directly at joshua.goodman@dos.myflorida.com.
All right, well, we're going to stay on for a couple more minutes and make sure that we get all of your questions answered. But thank you, Josh, for all of your expertise, and thanks to everybody else for being on today. So we're going to, as I said, we're going to stay on for a couple more minutes, but thanks for being on today.